The global reaction and angst and consternation and anger is not surprising because this is the most popular sport in the world. And for those that maybe are under a rock, Mosse, I'll let you explain what has happened over the last 48 hours, let's say.
Well, this long-rumored Super League looks like it's actually going to come to fruition. 12 clubs for now, there could be more joining, put out a statement over the weekend announcing plans to essentially form their own league, which would, in their view, usurp the UEFA Champions League. And the details are still murky. But essentially, it is these 12 super clubs saying we are sort of banding together away from UEFA and organizing our own competition. And I mean, I don't know if you want to get right into it, but the timing of this is truly remarkable because these clubs have been able to use the threat of a Super League to extract so many concessions from UEFA in recent years, including in this latest round of negotiations, which the clubs had come to an agreement on Friday with UEFA for a whole revamped format for the Champions League in which they were able to get more games and a bigger slice of the pie. And UEFA was all set to announce this today, which they went ahead and did anyway. But so once that happened, people thought, oh, okay, this whole Super League thing was a negotiating ploy yet again. And the super clubs were able to get more from UEFA. And instead, we find out that while they were negotiating with UEFA, they were actually cooking up this whole other competition. And they announced it the day before UEFA were set to announce the new Champions League format. So it's truly remarkable that this all played out.
Did you just paint UEFA as like the poor little, beaten upon type of side over there? I mean, look, the word greed has been thrown around over the last 72 hours relative to this. And as you mentioned, this is nothing new in that at times this has been floated out and at times it has been used for leverage. I think this is a whole different level, Mosse, in terms of what is being said, the detail in which it has been announced, the formality in which it has been announced, both in terms of the individuals involved, the teams involved, and that is why I think it becomes so, I guess, for lack of a better word, serious. But the hypocrisy and the sanctimony, and yes, the judgment and the ridiculousness out there should be a surprise to no one. When you look at, you mentioned UEFA. Our greed, I guess, is authentic and traditional, but somebody else's greed isn't. It's amazing how, Mosse, we use greed as a pejorative, and I know not to get all Gordon Gekko on you and all that kind of stuff, but we oftentimes refer to soccer players, attacking players, goal scorers as being greedy, and it's used as a form of compliment. They're greedy for goals. They want to have goals, but if a owner or a group of owners or a collection or a league or something out there is greedy, oh no, that's not good. That's not good. I believe that this is a situation where these are owners that are trying to do what they think is best for their business. And some of these are massive businesses, billion-dollar businesses, and global businesses, as we know. I also believe that if this comes to fruition, and if they produce a better product than the existing competition that is in the market, then I'll be a customer. I am a consumer of soccer. I want to see exciting, entertaining performances. I want to see things that I believe are fun and interesting out there. If this is created, Mosse, my question to you first and foremost, if this is created, do you think, and this is a big if, by the way, because it's still got a lot to work. Ultimately, the lawyers are the ones that are going to win ultimately. But if this comes to fruition, do you think that this is something that you and or the world out there will latch onto and enjoy? Will you buy this product?
Yes. I mean, if I'm like you, I love good soccer and if two great teams with players who I like watching are playing each other, I'll turn on the TV and watch. Listen, let me just say this. I'm not averse to change. Soccer fans are traditionalists by nature, and so they're very averse to change. But to me, this is how we've always done it is not an argument to keep doing it that way. Things have to constantly be reevaluated. And if there's ways to improve something, then I'm open to it. And so if all the European clubs wanted to band together and say, we don't like the way UEFA is organizing the Champions League right now, we think we can break apart from UEFA and organize a better competition, I'm open to that. And I'm at least willing to listen to what they came up with. So I don't object to this out of principle, but I reserve the right and you're right. Ultimately, the market will dictate, but I can still look at an idea on paper and have an opinion about whether it makes sense or not. I just ultimately don't like what they came up with. And my big objection to it is the lack of any meritocracy. When we talk about these super clubs, the reason Real Madrid and Juventus became super clubs, it wasn't like we all just rolled out of bed one day and decided these are going to be the biggest clubs in Europe. They earned it through decades of incredible success on the field. And as long as they keep doing that, then there would be no issue. But you have to at least allow for the possibility that if you're a big club and you get it spectacularly wrong, like we have seen with AC Milan in the last decade or Manchester United or even Arsenal right now, that you pay some sort of price for it. And instead, they've created this framework where certain clubs just get to be in this in perpetuity. And I think that's what rubs people the wrong way. Had they come up with a competition to usurp the Champions League that they thought was better, but that at least still function within sort of the basic pyramid of you having to qualify for it and earn your way to it, and teams can drop out depending on their poor performance, something where there was a greater sense of meritocracy to it, I think fans would have been more open to it. But it just rubs everybody the wrong way, this notion that these clubs are just going to go off and create this closed system where you don't even have to earn your way in. You just get to be in it.
Hold on, Mosse. Hold on. You're saying that it's a meritocracy right now?
Yes. I mean, right now, of course, certain clubs have tremendous advantages financially, but they still
then it's
have
not a meritocracy. So it's not about the best club win. You spend more money than somebody else and you win.
But a club that spends more money can screw it up. We've seen examples of that. I mean, Bayern Munich still have to finish in the top 4 in the Bundesliga to get in the Champions League. Of course, the notion of them not finishing in the top 4 seems preposterous, but there's still
not a meritocracy though, Mosse. If you really want a meritocracy, then everybody spends the exact same amount. It could be ridiculous amounts, but everybody should spend the exact same amount and then let the chips fall where they may. That's not a meritocracy.
But you don't think the system we have now, where the teams to be in the Champions League have to at least qualify via the domestic league placement, is more of a meritocracy than just taking certain teams and saying you're just in it?
More of a meritocracy. Oh, okay. So but it's not a meritocracy. Okay. And
there are degrees of meritocracy. I'm with you. We've talked on this podcast endlessly about how European football is becoming too top heavy and predictable, and it's the same teams. And I would be open to a salary cap and doing things to add more parity, but I still think what we have now is better than this. I mean, there's at least West Ham and Leicester are in the top 4 right now. They could theoretically qualify for next season's Champions League, while clubs like Arsenal and Tottenham are mid-table, so they're going to pay a price for screwing it up that badly. They're not going to qualify, and we're now creating a system where certain clubs just get to say, no, we're the big club, so we're in this in perpetuity. It doesn't matter what our actual performance is in our domestic leagues. I think that rubs people the wrong way.
Speaking of rubbing people the wrong way, our friend Grant Wall took a not a shot at me. He actually tweeted me earlier today as this news started to proliferate throughout the soccer world. Everyone's taking sides. Everybody's got their opinions. And by the way, let me digress here for a second. The clutching of pearls out there from pundits is interesting, but not surprising, and it's rather rich out there. Don't think for a second that all of the pundits out there and the folks in our business aren't raising their hands and thanking the soccer gods for this manna from heaven in terms of the content out there. And the performances so far have been chef's kiss out there. And once again, the hypocrisy out there. Anyway, Grant Wall, you wanted to say something about it, I can see though.
No. Say the Grant Wall bit.
Okay, so anyway, Grant Wall said, are you going to go all in and say you're supporting the Super League? Lots of hate engagement there for someone. So, Grant fishing for engagement. I'm going to give him back his engagement. And I tweeted back to him and said, Of course I will support this if it creates something better, ultimately. In the same way, and I think I've been pretty consistent over the years with this, that I have said that I will 100% support a new league that were to come along, for example, here in the United States or in the United States and Canada, and competed against Major League Soccer. And Major League Soccer is something near and dear to my heart. And if that new league aimed to provide and give the customer a better product, and maybe even a product that, I don't know, said had promotion relegation or something like that, I would 100% support that in the same way that I am supporting this. Let the best business and let the best product win out. And, so I sent that back to Grant Wall. And, like I said, it's interesting to see how people see this, how people color this, the good and bad. Owners as villains is nothing new. That is a characterization and a role that they recognize from the moment that these men and women sign on the dotted line and own these teams. They know that no matter what, they are going to be portrayed as villains. This just perpetuates that type of characterization in what they are doing. But there are only sinners out there. There are no saints. And so this quote unquote greed out there that we seem to have reserved judgment for, this dirty dozen or whatever you want to call the teams out there, you can find it with every team. You can find it with every league. You certainly can find it when it comes to UEFA or FIFA out there. But it's greed in one hand, okay, but if it's our greed, then it's okay. But if it's your greed, then it's not okay.
Yeah, I mean, although I'm not a fan of this, 2 points in your favor. These European clubs claim to have done research on it, and they found that younger fans actually support this more than you'd think. It's a lot of stodgy old pundits who presume to know how all fans feel about this, but actually the market research indicates that younger fans are more open to this idea. And number 2, I just want to revisit a point I just made. It's worth making again. Let's not pretend like the status quo is great. I know in this pandemic season, we've had some greater unpredictability in these domestic leagues, but as Miguel Delaney points out, identifying like the occasional success of a low spending club or the occasional failure of presenting the occasional success of a low spending club or the occasional failure of a big spending club as evidence that money doesn't rule football is like clinging to a few cold days to dismiss global warming. The larger trends are undeniable, and this sport is becoming incredibly top heavy and predictable. And there are certain super clubs that seem to be operating in their own universe. So this is already an issue where it feels like there are certain clubs that are sort of operating separate from everybody else. And this is just taking this to I think an extreme, but nevertheless, let's not pretend like the status quo now that they're disrupting is something that's working great. So to your point, yeah, I mean, the sport has a lot of issues right now anyway with this whole super club dynamic.
And by the way, if this happens, and that's still a big if, like we said, this is as close as I think we've gotten because of the formality of it, but there is still a lot of hoops to jump through in order for this to actually happen. But it's happening kind of in real time, even as we go on air. They've threatened to disqualify or take out anybody that's participating in this when it comes to Champions League, which would, by the way, be 3 out of the 4 teams participating in this. If this does come to fruition, there's a possibility that the public says, no, we don't want this. And as a business, as a product, it fails. And in doing so, maybe there is a changing of the guard. Maybe these, old school, old money, big super clubs that we have, they become so out of touch and bloated by doing something like this that they go away. And we have new ones that arise, and ones that we didn't even think about out there that kind of take that mantle and go on. Which brings me to my other point. And one of the legitimate concerns right now that is being raised is the knock-on effect and how this is going to impact other leagues, whether it's the EPL or La Liga or other teams that rely so heavily on that association from a business perspective, and certainly from a global business perspective, on having these super clubs as traditional parts of what they are doing. Mosse, how, in your crystal ball, if this were to happen, would it be detrimental to those teams and the sport going forward?
Yeah, I mean, right now, all the leagues, the domestic leagues, are threatening to expel these teams from their domestic leagues. And Gianni Infantino and FIFA are threatening the players that take part in the Super League with not being able to play for their countries in major international tournaments. If all these parties held true to that, then I think that would be the death of the Super League. But I want to see it. I want to see Gianni Infantino ban Messi and Ronaldo from playing in the next World Cup because Barcelona and Juventus are in the Super League. I want to see the Premier League ban Manchester United and Liverpool from taking part, given the cash cows that those clubs are. So I got to see it to believe it. But I mean, if if they held true to those threats, then I think that this Super League thing would be dead on arrival. But you're saying if the Super League actually goes through and these teams do get expelled from these competitions, what would it do to the Premier League and to these other?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that it's set up right now, take away the expulsion possibility right now. Though, if it all went as planned, you would have this situation where it's a Super League. And once again, it's not them completely leaving the leagues that they're in. This is a Wednesday type of scenario that is happening. And theoretically, it would, for these elite teams and those participating, it would replace Champions League. It remains to be seen whether Champions League could survive without these elite super clubs going forward. But in essence, that's what would happen. And then on the weekend, you would be back playing, Arsenal would play against Newcastle or whoever it ends up being. Now, part of the problem there is for people that look at it and say, okay, yes, but in normal times and in classic times, Arsenal is trying to get top 4 to qualify for the Champions League. And yet they have been assured, because 15 of these ultimately 20 teams will be guaranteed that no matter what, they are going to stay in this league. And so therefore it's closed. Another 5 will come in and out. So there is that opportunity for another 5. And by the way, when it comes to hypocrisy, in the moment that this is happening, as you mentioned, UEFA also announcing their new rules for Champions League, which include a clause for elite teams that don't qualify to qualify. So anyway, there's hypocrisy all over the place.
That's them giving into pressure from these super clubs that asked for that. UEFA, if they had their druthers, wouldn't include a clause like that. So all the concessions you saw announced in this new format today were an effort to stave off the Super League by giving these super clubs more of what they want. Like I said, more games. And we should say what the new format is. It increases the number of teams from 32 to 36. And rather than groups, it's a league format where the 36 teams are just all on one table and they play each other. I guess it's 10 games per team that would be drawn ahead of time. And then the top 8 advance automatically to the knockout stage, and then the teams 9 through 24 play in 2-legged ties to determine the other 8 teams, and then you're left with 16, and then the knockout stage continues as it is now. And so, but yeah, in this deal, the bigger clubs get a bigger slice of the pie. They get more games, which is what they wanted. So this was viewed as sort of UEFA giving them what they want. So why do you need a Super League anymore? You essentially have one here, but apparently this wasn't enough for the super clubs because they want to be able to keep all the money. Right now, the way the framework, the Champions League is obviously this huge revenue generator, and the clubs do get to keep a lot of it, but some of it goes to UEFA, and that's the money they use to give to some of the smaller federations to fund women's soccer and all these other programs. And these super clubs are saying, we don't understand why we're kicking in this much money to UEFA, and some don't even want to kick anything at all. They want to be able to keep all the revenues generated for themselves. So that's kind of at the heart of all this.
Mosse, speaking of another thing, speaking of the heart of things, another thing that has been brought up through all of this is this concept that, I reject to a certain extent. These are sports teams, okay? These are not charities. Now, I recognize that sports occupies a place in our life that's different in when it comes to business and products and customers and all that kind of stuff. It's not necessarily the same as buying soap. Do you think that these are something more than actual businesses when we look at them? And I'm not talking about some of the concessions and the advantages that sports teams have, even in our own country. You look at antitrust laws and that kind of stuff. But do you think ultimately that it's okay for them to operate as businesses like anything else? Or do you think that there is a charitable element of them that puts them in a different level than other products and other businesses out there?
I think you can mostly operate as a business, but with an understanding that you can't take it too far. There are certain lines you can't cross. If the Liverpool owners got offered a deal where if they tore down Anfield and built some new state-of-the-art stadium, they would generate more money by doing that. But in that case, you have to have an understanding of what that stadium means to that city, that community. So I do think I agree with you. Generally speaking, it's a business, but I mean, these soccer teams do occupy a special place in these communities. So there are instances where you have to curb a little bit of that. Come
on, Mosse. Really? That's the example you're going to use? Anfield? Look, I know it's historic. I know it's got, it's a personal thing for people, but everything moves, everything evolves, everything changes. I mean, even the EPL in itself was created out of something like this. And and fundamentally changed. And by the way, they created not just the most popular league in the world, but the league that generates the most revenue out there. So you want to talk about greed.
Crucially, they stayed within the English football pyramid. There's still promotion, relegation,
Sure.
and we've seen teams move up from the lower divisions and get into the Premier League. So that's my big criticism here. These clubs, listen, I'm no big fan of UEFA, and I totally buy that some of these presidents at these bigger clubs might be smarter than the people at UEFA and could have come up with a better competition with a better format that generates more money and is more entertaining. But I wish they had come up with something that still worked within the general pyramid. Like I said, I know you don't like this word meritocracy, but preserving some sense of having to earn your way in it rather than just being in it in perpetuity.
Can you imagine if you are of those ultimate 15 teams that are guaranteed spots regardless of what they do? I mean, theoretically, I'm just using Arsenal as an example. Arsenal could, in its weekend club situation in the EPL, get relegated and yet still be playing in the Super League but can you imagine? But because the competition part of it, I think, is very, very important, because there's a narrative out there that this is going to dampen and even alleviate that type of competition that you have. Can you imagine if you are that 15th place team, or even if you end up 20th, right? Even with the 5 teams that are invited each year, or that qualify in, however it is. If you are that Arsenal that does finish, I don't buy that teams and players are going to be less competitive in the Super League situation that we are talking about, because of the fact that they are just going to be back again next year.
No, but no, listen, as we've talked about, all these big clubs that are going to be in the Super League, because they have such advantages when it comes to finances, they probably, if we did set up a meritocratic system like I'm advocating, those probably would be the clubs that would routinely qualify for that competition anyway. But I just feel like you have to at least allow for a big club getting it spectacularly wrong.
And it's just performative, just to have it, to saying that you have it. I mean, oh my gosh. And by the way, somebody asked me about the MLS component of it. And we always kind of look and compare and contrast. The owners of European teams, okay, they certainly did not need Major League Soccer to understand or to appreciate that mitigating the threat of relegation could be good for their business. All right. Most owners out there would gladly agree to take the relegation risk off the table. And by the way, to your point, those who say they wouldn't usually aren't threatened by it at all, because they've spent so much money that they've hedged their bets in terms of what their ability to do. All right, Mosse, what else do you want to hit on this? Because, we kind of have to push it down the road and see how this, and it's happening in real time. Like we said, there could be players and teams that are banned from participating in Champions League going forward. Somebody asked me if I were signing today for a club in Europe, and signing with whatever club it ended up being precluded me from participating and representing my country with the national team, would I still sign? And that's a good question. I don't think I would. I think that would be a game-changing type of thing, and that would make it a no-go, not being able to participate. And it still remains to be seen if that's even enforceable. And once again, the courts and the laws are going to get involved as to what you're able to do and what you can and what you can't do. But yeah, I think that would be really problematic for me. Now, I say that, and yet if you throw ridiculous amounts of money at players, it's amazing what we will do. And it's amazing how quickly we can get over the disappointment and sadness of not representing your country relative to when you go to your ATM each and every week.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.